Today I'm talking to Phil Howie, the CEO and founder of Onwardly. We talk about how he got into startups, what it's like to grow a business, some of the things he's learned recently about the technology and security industry, and how he's trying to help small to medium businesses improve their security. Phil, I think it'd be great to start if I could just get you to, tell us a bit about who you are and what you do. Just provide a bit of audience context for the audience, just to kind of set the scene a bit.
Cool. Well, I should say thank you for having me on the podcast, and it's nice to be here, nice to be talking to you. And look, so I'm CEO and founder of Onwardly, a new startup based here in Auckland, New Zealand. I've been running that for a couple of years now, but we're really just getting started. So my background is really in the sort of tech industry, in the tech space. Been part of startups for the last decade, and been in the tech industry a bit longer than that as well. So we run a product we sell to other local tech companies, and increasingly going global around helping other teams create a well-defended organization. So I speak a little bit more about that later, but my job at the moment is very much building the startup and taking it to the next stage of growth.
That's so exciting. Look, I am really fascinated by entrepreneurs and particularly people working in that startup space. So why does that space suit you? Why did you get into startups?
That's a good question. It's a pretty intense place to play in. It's fast paced, which I love about it. It's a little bit of uncertainty. You don't quite know how it's all going to go, but it's thrilling to be able to create something which doesn't exist and to really pioneer a certain space. And so I've been part of the startup world, I guess, for the better part of a decade. And really was my first major experience into it was with a local company called PushPay, which probably a lot of people have heard of. So I was fortunate enough to be on the ground really as employee number one of PushPay, which sounds pretty crazy now, but back then it was just a couple of guys and an idea and sounded a bit mad really. And I signed on to help build the first version of this product. So, my background is in product dev and design. And kind of just stayed on for the next 6 years, really, as we grew from really nothing to quite a substantial business. And so that was a kind of like a baptism of fire, as you were, in terms of exposure to the startup world. Lots of change, really seeing a company go from sort of 3 people, 4 people through to 10, 20, 50, 100, couple of hundred, and across to 2 different parts of the world is quite an intense experience. So a lot of personal growth for me, a lot of different roles, different responsibilities throughout that experience, and somewhere along the line I kind of caught the bug to do this for myself. I think you're either you have to be a little bit crazy, I think, and to do this myself, and so I signed on to do it.
Why do you say that? Why do you think you got to be a little bit crazy?
Yeah, because I don't think it's a rational choice for a lot of people. There's a lot of risk, and you're essentially saying that instead of getting a great role with another company over here, I'm going to start this thing which is totally uncertain, take a voluntary vow of poverty for however long it takes to get it off the ground, and at the end of it you might have nothing to show for it, and that's a very real outcome for a lot of people. But you do it because it gives you certain autonomy, and you make a certain bet on yourself and on the market that you can develop something really meaningful and really valuable, and go on a journey that perhaps you might not be able to go on if you just simply took a role somewhere, right? And so it's not for everyone, but I think it's also really, really exciting to be part of and to do, and having been part of one and having now run one myself, it's a very cool experience where you get lots of quite amazing opportunity as to be part of.
Absolutely. And speaking of exciting opportunities, so tell us about your current startup with Onwardly. Tell us about that.
Sure. So Onwardly is a cybersecurity collaboration tool which helps teams create well-defended organizations. I've rehearsed that a couple of times. So
that's nice. You said well though.
Very well, thanks. So what we're doing is we are a software as a service company. We're selling mostly to other tech businesses, starting here in New Zealand and beyond. And we're trying to help people really establish and operate an effective security program. And many companies find this quite hard to do. You probably know this really well from your work in security, but it's often, you know, kind of low priority in a business. But it has real consequences if we don't do it well. And what I noticed really at my last role as a CTO is that you tend to kind of wear this hat in a company that's around, you know, sort of 30, 40, 50 people. You wear the security hat amongst many other hats in the business.
Yes.
And it's upon you to do, you know, to really drive that forward. And so I began sort of looking around for ways to help me do this in an effective manner. So to save time, to give me some clarity of direction, and to give me a great tooling experience to help me manage all these processes. And I wasn't very satisfied with what I saw in the marketplace out there. You know, most people are stuck using general purpose tools, or they've got sort of Word documents floating around file systems and things like that. And I just, you know, I thought as a product builder, as a designer, there must be a better way. So after I finished up at that role, I started researching all things security, how tech companies in particular were handling this. And the result of that research was they're not doing very well. And indeed, most businesses are not doing very well. Some are doing really well, some are, but they're the minority. And so I saw a huge need really in the marketplace to help these organizations, and then indeed, you know, really much wider than that. So I created Onwardly. I built a product which helps people really assess, helps them put in place good policy, and really helps them operationalize all that work so that they can get it done and be successful over the long term when it comes to security practice. If that makes sense.
Because and I can understand what you mean, because not all IT people are trained in security or security frameworks, or you know, what that sort of looks like. So so I imagine this is a tool that kind of helps them understand the sort of things they need to have in place, the kind of key policies. And so who is this product being set up for? Like, is it for all businesses or a particular market that you've gone after?
Yeah, that's a good question. So really, it's the security principles at play are really applicable kind of anywhere, right? Across any organization, there's a foundational set of generally accepted, you know, security principles you can apply just about to any organization. But that being said, any startup needs to find focus and needs to find a market that they can really begin to serve and begin to sell to much more effectively than just spreading too thin. So I've been in the tech space for a little while and knew some people, also kind of had a stronger empathy with what it's like to run that kind of sort of CTO or head of engineering type of role. So it seemed like a really good place to start. So I've shaped the offering and shaped the business and the platform around serving tech companies initially, with a view to sort of bring that to a wider and wider audience as we go out. You know, go on beyond New Zealand into Australia and then to the rest of the world. You know, there's lots of potential other industry verticals or even smaller or larger size companies that could really benefit from something like Onwardly. So that's the plan. Start narrow, start focused, and then start to kind of widen your horizons a bit once we get going.
And if you had to kind of distill what you know, the value proposition is Onwardly compared to other kind of cyber products out there and kind of awareness things, like how would you explain that?
Sure. So I think there's a few, right? I think peace of mind is one that comes to, it's probably number one. So many people are anxious. They don't know how well they're doing. There's no number that they have. There's no measurement. They know that things are not good enough. So peace of mind is a really big one. We give people confidence that they're doing the right things, they're taking the right steps. I think that's a good one. Secondly, I'd say time saving. You know, many people really, when starting to kind of think about this and talk to people in the market, they were like, my number one problem is what do I do next? Right? Just tell me what to do next. And that's a hard problem to solve, but we can make it certainly a lot easier for people to understand, to give them a pathway, to give them clarity, and to save all that time, you know, researching this, try to find out all the stuff themselves. We can take them through a sort of guided experience, as it were. So time savings is really significant, you know. And then I guess you could say monetary savings as well. You know, instead of necessarily hiring a lot of people, consultants are just out of reach for a lot of businesses, particularly smaller businesses, and so they they can use something like Onwardly and save a lot of money in the process, and do a lot of that foundational work themselves, which is really important to do.
Cool. And so in terms of, I guess, business and startup Onwardly, or even your kind of other experience, like maybe an interesting question is, like, what are you most proud of? Like, if you weren't being humble.
Yeah, like, I mean, I think from a business point of view, you know, I think starting this business, to be honest, you know, it's one thing to be part of a startup. It's another thing to start one yourself. And I think I have a much fresher appreciation for what it takes to do this. And from a, you know, I'm learning every day. Every day I start something, I start a task that I don't know how to do. And so it's a continual process of learning, of keeping at it. And I'm really proud of what we've achieved. You know, we've got over a dozen really great New Zealand businesses on board. We're starting to push into Australia. We're just actually started raising our first round of capital, which is again new process we're going through. Haven't gone through it before, so getting comfortable with this feeling of continual learning and uncertainty is what you kind of sign up for. But I'm really proud of what I've achieved, and what my team of advisors and people who have been involved in the business, and we're really just getting started, have achieved so far, and super excited about where we're going from here.
And has that always been a learning process for you, to kind of, you know, learn something by doing it, rather than, I don't know, doing a training course or, you know, talking to someone else? Or is that a natural feeling for you to kind of jump in by doing, or is that something you've learned because of necessity of startup?
Yeah, I think it's a necessity, really, and I don't think you ever quite get comfortable with, you know, learning is kind of hard by definition. You know, you're learning a new skill, there's a great degree of uncertainty. And I remember several moments in my, you know, my journey with, like, for when I was at Pushpay, for example, and, you know, holding my head in my hands, just going, I don't understand this. This is really, really hard. It might have been some super gnarly technical problem or something like that. And then a really great colleague of mine said, oh, you know, that's what learning feels like. Learning feels like that tough, nitty-gritty, like uncomfortable feeling of processing something with your brain, and then you kind of come out the other side and you're like, oh, okay, I get that now. It's not so scary. It sort of makes sense. But there's a massive trough of uncertainty and despair sometimes that you go through to learn anything. And I think recognizing that, and for what it is, means you're more willing to voluntarily go into that. And you sort of put up with the uncertainty, really, and then you come out the other side and you've hopefully learned something. And maybe it takes a couple of goes in some cases, but you willingly go into it. And so I think there is a certain aspect of just doing it. There's some theory, and sometimes, which is good to kind of learn first, but inevitably you actually have to do it. And you don't really, from what I understand as well, you don't really learn something until you have to recall it. Do you actually have to use the information? Is what they say. And so it's not enough just to read about something in theory. You actually have to do it and have to apply that knowledge really to truly learn anything. So there's no escape plan.
I often think there's kind of a bit of a seesaw or tipping point as well, when so you're learning something and you've been doing it for a while, and then eventually you get to the point where you're like, actually, I am this thing that I'm trying to do. You know, like even me, you know, way back when as a psychologist starting out in security, and then I kind of reached the point where I was like, I'm doing an information security job. I'm actually an information security manager. Like there's
it catches up, doesn't it?
Owning the thing that you're doing, and then you're like, actually, I've done enough of this. I think I can, you know, own this thing and be this thing, not just pretend to be it, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like, yeah. And probably starting out in business is very similar. As always, like, hold on, I'm the director of this.
Yeah.
This is what I'm doing. I do know enough about this.
What I would say is that I think I still suffer this now, but I think especially in the first 12 months plus, there's massive imposter syndrome. You know, who am I to start a business? Who am I to, you know, everyone just knows me as like Phil the designer or Phil the developer, but not Phil the startup owner, you know, and I think that's very real, right? And it takes a while to kind of catch up. And I still feel it every time I post on social media, every time I do these things, you know, there's this tinge of, and so I think it's continually reinforcing yourself, like, no, I am this, I am doing this, you know, this is not those fears or whatever are not a big deal. I'm just going to push through and keep stepping into this role that I know I can do, and that I know I'm set up for. And it sounds kind of insignificant. It sounds like a minor thing, but it's actually a very real daily challenge for for anyone pioneering anything, anyone changing into a new role, anyone learning something new. It really is a very real thing. Yeah,
absolutely, and everyone feels it, I think, as well. I think it used to be kind of like considered maybe more of a female thing, but just untrue. I think everyone can feel that imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And interestingly, fun fact, with apparently with COVID lockdowns and things like that, imposter syndrome has become even more of a thing, because people are feeling like they have to demonstrate that they are, kind of working or doing enough or looking after the family enough or whatever it might be. But apparently, imposter syndrome has gone through the roof since lockdowns, which is kind of interesting, because people can't see you doing things. You have to, kind of show people that you're working or looking after family or kind of whatever it is. So interesting.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yeah.
And so switching gears a little bit. So as you said, you've been in the tech industry for a while. What about the technology or security industry have you learned recently? Like, is there anything you've kind of picked up on that's happening?
Yeah, I think perhaps there's a couple of things. I think, the technology industry has really gone from a lot of ways, look at what's possible. This is amazing. And we can do this, and we can, engage people with notifications and all these sorts of possibilities, really, in this sort of maybe the first decade of this century, to kind of coming to the realization of what that means for people's mental health and the sort of impact it starts to have on people. And so this is not sort of a recent trend, but I think it's really highlighted to me the responsibility we have when, as I guess, tech workers or people that work in the tech space, as technologists and digital people, to understand and look after people. I think we play an increasingly important role in people's lives, shaping people's lives, influencing people. When you're seeing this with all the social media sort of big shakeups happening at the moment, but just on a more subtle level.
That came to mind as you were saying that. Yeah.
We can directly impact people's mental health, and that's, that is I think that's a huge responsibility, and increasingly the power that we have, and the people that don't necessarily become digital natives or become tech people can be left behind by that if we're not careful as well. So I think for my mind, what I think about is there's a bigger and greater responsibility if you work in this space to think about ethics, to think about the way that people are using your products, to think about privacy, all that sort of thing that perhaps maybe we were a little bit more blasé about 10 years ago. Yeah. And so that's not a very, very recent thing, but it's a gradual trend that I think has been really happening very much so, and it's certainly increased in the last couple of years. You only have to be paying a little bit of attention to see what that's the impact that's having on people.
100%, and you're so right, because it actually goes both ways. Like you say, it's the impact of creating the technology can have on people and well-being and attention span, all that kind of stuff, but then also that we're bringing everyone along on the technology journey as well, and not leaving people behind. Like you said, I just yesterday I saw this infographic, and it's one they put out every year, and it's called "What's Happening on the Internet Every Minute," and it has kind of stats for number of Snapchats that have gone on, how many Facebook posts, how many Google searches, that kind of thing. And then one of the things they said at the bottom of it was that the internet has grown to a point where now 65% of the world are using the internet. Well, I kind of went, only 65?
Only 65.
What the? Like, you just assume. I mean, when you think about it properly, that not everyone has the is able to access internet and things like that all around the world. But it's very easy to assume that everyone can remote work and everyone has access to devices and tablets and so I love that point you just made around the impact of technology, but both ways. That's a really good point.
I mean, they call it digital poverty, you know, and there are people that just simply don't have access to this stuff, and they, you know, increasingly, I mean, it's a superpower in a way, being able to be really digitally native, computer savvy, being able to, you know, it's like a superpower in your life. If you don't have that, you're increasingly, I believe, you'll be at a disadvantage in society, and so, you know, that's a huge responsibility really for everyone to make sure that, you know, we're all connected, we have those skills, we have devices, all that sort of stuff. And it's not that we don't exist to serve those devices, to serve digital. I think digital still exists to serve us. And that's probably another point that I would make, is that as a technologist, it's tempting to just jump on every tool and use technology for the sake of technology. And sometimes that's fun as an experiment, but ultimately we're still humans. And you know, apps and tools don't necessarily replace a conversation. They don't replace the human finessing that we all need. And I think that extends to the workplace as well. You know, we are human, we're imperfect, we require human connection, and tools can serve that, but we don't exist to serve the tools. You know?
Yeah, it's that golden phrase, everything in moderation, isn't it? Like that suits so well in so many different parts of your life. And that's probably quite a nice link into something else I was keen to talk to you about, which is around digital culture, being the digital culture show here. What do you think that means, having a digital culture in an organization?
Yeah, that's good. I was thinking about that question sort of prior to this as well, and I suspect that we all have a digital culture of some sort, whether we acknowledge it or not. You know, it's hard to exist. It's very hard to exist as an organization these days without some sort of digital things happening. You know, some industries are very much still perhaps like paper-based, and which is fascinating to me that, you know, they're going through their own transformations. One of the industries that I looked after in my last role was literally going through a paper-based transformation in the late 2010s.
Ooh, scanning documents and
literally paper to digital-based checklists. You know, fascinating. So it was just the right time for them. They're very old school industry. And so that's, you know, I think about those organizations, they're going from people carrying around clipboards and ticking boxes to carrying around smartphones and taking photos and all that sort of stuff. So I think, again, just going back to my previous point, you know, the technology is there to serve us, to make our lives easier, to get more done. But ultimately, we're still human, you know, and I think there needs to be a healthy blend of recognizing that. And I think sometimes I've seen we skew too far in one direction. You know, it all becomes all about the technology, and it's not necessarily healthy. And then we go, you know, maybe to the other way. We don't use enough technology, and we're missing out on some of those benefits. So for me, it's about finding the right mix, you know, but not in the process of acknowledging our humanity and you know, celebrating that at the same time.
And maybe a little bit of a look into your own digital culture now. Can you share with us, like, what are the top apps you've got on your iPhone home screen? Like, what are you spending most time on?
All the boring ones.
Or the most interesting ones.
all the boring ones that get the job done. You know, I've got a mixture of, you know, the social media apps, but just, you know, a web browser is the most fundamental tool we have. I mean, a web browser is, you know, your window into the entire world. So that's right in the center, just the most convenient place for my thumb to land on the glass. But a lot of reading books, you know, I read a lot of, I'm a bit old school. I read RSS feeds. I bookmark websites to my homepage, which feels a little bit, you know, 2007, but still do that. You know, read a lot, listen to things. You know, COVID tracer app, of course.
Yeah, exactly.
I try to keep it kind of simple, actually, and just use the fundamentals and do those really, really well. But yeah, reading and listening mostly.
That's so interesting that your main place for apps is the middle of your screen, because mine is the top right. Like, as in, if you were reading, you would start there and you would go like that, and that's the order of priority of my apps. But you've gone for actual human. Interesting.
Well, there's this in the mobile design world. There's this kind of, for right-handed people at least.
I'm talking to the right person about this as well, aren't I?
Right-handed people, but there's a sort of a sweet spot where if you're holding the phone in one hand, It's what can your thumb reach in the most comfortable way. And that's why typically you see a lot of the hot listers on the bottom of the device, but you actually have a little space above that, which is even more comfortable to reach than the very bottom row. And that's kind of your you'll see a lot of interactivity, primary activity with mobile apps in that region because it's optimized to be as easy as possible. So it kind of sucks if you're left-handed, unfortunately, because apps are probably not designed for you. But such as life, and then you try to, but good designers and good people will think about all of that as well.
That's so cool. I love that tidbit. Thank you. Yeah, and so what's coming up for you, Phil? What's happening next? What are you looking forward to? What's going on?
Oh, look, on a personal level, looking forward to seeing friends again, more easily, and summer, and it's been a long winter. We've kind of come through a lot this year. Me personally, I think, and kind of the nation a bit here as well. So looking forward to just getting into that, and from a business point of view, like I said, we're raising capital. It's a pretty exciting journey for us. Once that closes out, we're able to do a lot more. So some pretty exciting things on the horizon from that perspective. More to come on that. But next year's gearing up to be a very, very big year for business, and and I hope that we sort of slowly return to the new normal in terms of whatever that looks like for us as a country, where people can perhaps travel again, where there's fewer lockdowns, when we kind of get on to business as usual, as a nation. And I think it's probably naive to think that's going to happen super quickly, but looking forward to that happening nonetheless.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, Phil. It's been so cool. I just, I think it's been really interesting to chat to you, particularly around business and startups and things like that. It's such an interesting space for people to be in. As we kind of finish up and sum up, is there any kind of final words or calls to action that you want to give our audience?
Look, I think, I'm a little bit biased, but I think pay attention to security. A lot of people are still not doing the foundational stuff well, and it's really important. It's not hard to do. Pay attention, find those critical things that you need to do, and just do them. Give it priority both in your personal life and for your organization that you're working with as well. We really need to kind of all lift our game on that, and that's what we're on a mission to do. So that would be my takeaway.
Awesome. Thanks, Phil.
Cool. Thank you. Thanks for having me.